Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I once again rise on behalf of the good people of Smilkmeans, South Okanagan, West Kootenay, a riding that has 6 border crossings, to speak to the legislation before us, Bill C-2. We know this bill is much more than a border bill. My riding and province have very much been on the front lines of an addiction crisis that has persisted for far too long. In fact, drug overdoses is now the leading cause of death among BC youth ages 10 to 18. Shame. Too many families in our communities have lost their children to drug addiction. Too many drug kingpins who fuel this crisis have not been put behind bars. Even before my time here in the House, my Conservative colleagues have highlighted the threat to our communities of the drug running happening across the U.S.-Canadian border, with little to no response from the government during the lost Liberal decade. We've long called for concrete actions to strengthen our borders, while the Trudeau Liberal government chose to look the other way. Since they were first elected, there has been a 632% increase in U.S. Border Patrol encounters with people illegally attempting to enter the United States from Canada. This directly results from the government's failure to enforce effective border security. The Liberals have allowed this crisis to fester and grow, and it's putting Canadians at risk. Many of those crossings were to traffic illegal firearms into Canada for use by criminal gangs. Canadian security services have identified 350 organized crime rings operating within our borders. For years, the Liberals, knowing we had severe problems at our border with the United States, dragged their feet on addressing any of these issues related to these illegal firearms. Instead, they started targeting law-abiding firearm owners and treated them as if they were a source of rising firearm violence that needed to be dealt with. Hunters and sport shooters, vital to our tourism, are now often turned around at the border, and even if they go through extensive paperwork, checking every box, they often have their property wrongfully seized, which takes them weeks, if not months, to get back. Even in my riding, we've seen the Liberal government go after my local sports shooters and archers. The Penticton Shooting Sports Association, situated on federally managed land for more than 40 years, recently saw its lease cancelled by this government without explanation. That's 40 years they've been there. This is happening despite their facilities offering vital training resources to the RCMP, border guards, cadets, and the public. The club's services include hunter education, firearms safety instruction, youth and cadet firearms training, and a family-friendly environment for competitive shooting sports. I cannot emphasize enough that this is a vital training facility and club that needs to stay open. In the meantime, illegal firearms stream across the border, where CBSA agents, already understaffed, are stretched thin, trying to slow the flow, and gun-related crime is up 116%, with 85% of gun offenses committed using illegal firearms originating from the United States. Looking at C2, Liberal MPs have spent the last several weeks proclaiming that this new government for Canada will set new priorities, calling it the Stronger Borders Act. However, upon closer examination, Bill C2 goes well beyond the issue of borders, which Conservatives in this election were very clear that we would strengthen. The Liberals have packaged a range of measures into this legislation that were not discussed, let alone mentioned anywhere in the Liberal platform. Measures irrelevant to the management of the border or the combating of illegal drug trafficking are rife in this Stronger Borders Act. There is no question that this legislation contains some measures that members of this House probably would support, but it's such a sweeping piece of legislation that leaves us hard-pressed as members to see what the ultimate consequences of some of these changes might be, or whether the measures actually included will actually address the problems that they seek to solve. Or, worse, whether these measures are in direct conflict with our civil liberties. A clear example is that the Liberals have promised to invest more money into border investigations and scanners after years of calls to do so from my Conservative colleagues. Official statistics show that only 1% of shipping containers are inspected when coming into our country. This represents a wide-open opportunity for criminals to push drugs and guns through the other 99%, and this is nothing new. More money for container scanning is welcome, but once again, the details are completely lacking. Canadians cannot be protected by a press release. The Liberals are offering no timeline for when the investment in upgrading and expanding our scanning tools will be made, or even when these resources might reach the border. It is a broken record in Canada of Liberal funding announcements being made, and then the minister sitting back and assuming that changes, even positive changes, will magically appear before us all. A decade of Liberal government has shown an addiction to taking credit for announcing measures instead of enacting or even considering them. Canadians were not impressed by the last-minute election commitment to purchase 2 Black Hawk helicopters to patrol the entire Canadian-U.S. border. Our border with the United States is just under 8,900 kilometers. It is unlikely that 2 helicopters could cover it in a month, let alone monitoring operations for smugglers. Even for the hundreds of kilometers of the border that my riding encompasses, having 2 helicopters cover that large distance, even if both are in operation, stretches credibility. It's a joke. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to touch on an issue many Canadians have raised with this legislation regarding civil liberties, specifically the section of the bill that would amend the Canada Post Corporation Act. Bill C-2 broadens the government's ability to open our mail. Canadians would expect that personal private correspondence would be beyond government intervention. The Liberals must provide a more comprehensive response as to what circumstances this would be justifiable for this. As my colleague, the member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou, asked earlier this month, is this even charter compliant? Canadians expect this Parliament to make strong laws to protect them, but they also expect that their basic liberties and privacy will be respected. Several sections of this legislation have raised concerns amongst privacy experts, and civil liberty organizations, and their concerns must be respected. The balance of security and liberty is also at the heart of Western democracy. Therefore, any government seeking to grant further powers to intervene in Canadians' everyday lives deserves the greatest level of scrutiny. Conservatives will continue to scrutinize this legislation ahead of the next vote, while continuing to argue for the proper enforcement of our border and ports and appropriate punishments for criminals.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, yet another Conservative member that continues to want to give misinformation. The reality is that today we have the Canada Post inspectors. They can actually go through parcels, anything over 500 grams. Anything under 500 grams, a simple letter. Someone could put fentanyl into that letter and mail it. There is no one opening up those letters. Under this legislation, we are enabling, under a general warrant, to be able to open up those letters. It's a pretty simple, straightforward process. Yet the Conservatives are trying to give the impression that you've got people working in the post office that are not Canada Post inspectors going through the mail, opening up letters that they want to. That's just not the case. This legislation gives more opportunity to deal with the fentanyl. Would she not support that?
Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for his question. I think the bottom line, this bill is being pushed through at such a rapid rate that Canadians don't trust what's happening. They don't trust the Liberals here. So many times in the last 10 years, the Liberals have promised something and nothing happens, or something else comes through. This has not been explained properly to the Canadian people, and I'm not making this up. I'm hearing from my constituents. We're all hearing from our constituents that they do not trust the Liberals with this bill, and they're afraid they are going to lose their civil liberties if passed.
Hear, hear.
Questions et commentaires. La députée de...
The honourable member for Beauharnois-Salaberry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity because we're going through strange times in Quebec. The little 3-year-old girl has just been found. She'd been abandoned by her mother, and she was found in St. Albert in Ontario. So I'd like to share my happiness with everyone here in this place and thank the police officers and thank everyone who took part actively in finding this little girl. So she's alive, she's doing well, and we'll find out more about the story, but I think we need to thank the police and everyone who pitched in, all the members of the public that gave information that helped find her in St. Albert. That said, my question for my colleague is, the minister, in order to meet their goals, said that they would recruit 1,000 more border officers. Currently, Canada's capacity to train people is only 600 a year. Isn't it a bit strange that we have no idea what the department's plan is to meet the goal? The honourable member.
I want to thank, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for her question, and also congratulate the police for their good job. I believe there are so many problems with this bill, and that is one of them. Nothing is explained. They talk about hiring more border guards. Well, where are they going to get these people? They also talk about hiring 1,000 more RCMP members. Well, you can talk to any municipalities across the country, and they're waiting for RCMP officers. They have a lack of people applying for the job. There is nobody is applying at Depot, so there's a lack of RCMP officers, and they're so expensive for the communities. So I wonder where this bill, this government, Liberal government, plans to get 1,000 RCMP officers.
Questions and comments. The member for Brandon Source, a short question with a short answer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to put some facts on the record, contrary to the member for Winnipeg North, who talks about misinformation, well, the only misinformation here is from him, in that a government that he is pretending is different, which is exactly the same as it has been for the last 10 years and the last 20 years that he's been here. So he questions the credibility of a long-serving municipal official from British Columbia about what she's hearing from her constituents. So I'd like to give her another chance to put the facts on the record about what she's hearing from her constituents with regard to the failures of this same Liberal government on border security and public safety as a whole.
Honourable member in 20 seconds or less.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for his question. This is true. I am hearing this, and we are hearing this across the country, that people are afraid. Canadians are afraid of what might happen if we allow the government to have too much power.